Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the smoky warmth of a Viking longhouse where icy winds whip across the fjords. Yet inside it's cozy enough to knock you out like a baby walrus wrapped in wool. We're diving into why the people of Viking times, yes, axe swinging, horn wearing, well, not really, might have enjoyed some of the best sleep in human history. Honestly, you probably couldn't handle that level of comfort. If we dropped you into their nightly routine, you'd be snoring in 9 seconds flat. So before you get too relaxed, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments what city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe switch on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of a snowy clearing in what's now rural Norway. The air smells of pine and distant sea salt. Overhead, a deep navy sky is scattered with stars sharp as glass etchings. In the stillness of that cold landscape rests a longhouse, crouched like a sleeping beast timber walls, thick, thatched roof heavy with frost. Inside, a low fire glows at the hearth. You duck through the doorway, and warmth folds around you like a living blanket. Viking households weren't just rough shelters. They were thoughtfully crafted communal homes. A central hall stretches the length of the structure, with raised wooden platforms lining each side where families sleep beneath layers of bedding. Down the middle runs the fire pit, always smoldering but never completely out, keeping the air warm without choking on smoke. The scent is a mix of wood smoke and drying herbs overhead. Somewhere a goat snores softly in the corner. You can already feel the drowsiness creeping in, can't you? And here's the twist, despite the brutal nature of Viking life. With all the fieldwork, rowing through icy seas, and fending off raiders, sleep was treated as sacred. After the sun slipped beyond the horizon, there were no artificial lights, no street lamps, no buzzing devices flashing news from faraway kingdoms. Just pure, enveloping darkness. The body naturally drifted toward rest, melatonin flowing like a tide. By evening, the entire household slowed its rhythm. Candles flickered in small stone niches, children curled up beside their parents under bundles of fur, listening to tales of Thor and the giants. There was no rush to isolate or divide the family for the night. Privacy didn't mean solitude. It meant a small nook, maybe a carved divider, maybe a hanging fur curtain. Most often people slept together, sharing heat, comfort, and safety in a world that could turn deadly cold without warning. Here's a delightful detail. Vikings were masters of layering. Not just their clothes, but their bedding too. Woolen blankets, thick furs, and for the lucky few, feather-stuffed pillows. The bottom layer was usually animal hide to block the chill rising through wooden planks. You'd lie down beside the fire's quiet crackle, body tired from real, hard labor, stomach warm from stew and barley bread, and eyes already half closed. Sounds like the perfect sleep setup, doesn't it? Scholars still debate how universal this comfort was. Some suggest poorer households slept on straw or simple animal skins, while others believe that even the humblest families made warmth a priority, because surviving a Nordic winter without it wasn't an option. What no one disputes is that Viking communal sleep culture led to longer, deeper rest. Hours upon hours of peaceful, uninterrupted slumber in a society that treated the night not as wasted time, but as a sacred pause. And the soundscape matched that peace. No traffic, no plumbing, no hum of machines. Just the faint creak of wood, the wind against the eaves, and maybe the soft breath of livestock close by. In many homes, animals literally shared the living space, not out of eccentricity, but practicality. Those body temperatures added warmth. That goat snoring in the corner is basically your space heater. But what truly completes the picture is rhythm. Viking life pulsed with the sun, and seasons work by day, rest by night. You weren't expected to be productive at midnight, or answer some torch-lit raven scroll about grain yields. Night was sacred, and the Longhouse a refuge of dreams. You find your spot along one of the raised platforms, maybe beside a fur-wrapped elder, murmuring a story of sea spirits, or a warrior snoring like thunder. You pull a blanket to your chin, hear the faint hiss of an ember collapsing, and let your eyes close. This is how the Viking night began, not as an end, but as a ritual of recovery, closeness, and warmth. The Viking Longhouse doesn't just feel cozy, it's engineered for it. As the fire glows, and your breath hangs in soft clouds at the room's cooler edges, take a closer look at where all this peaceful slumber actually happens. While modern homes obsess over walk-in closets and tile patterns, back then the priority was simple. Build a sleeping space that wouldn't let the cold win by morning. You pad across the wooden planks and past the hearth, where the flames still whisper warmth into the air. On either side of the central aisle, long raised platforms run the length of the hall benches by day, beds by night. There are no private rooms, no locked doors, no do not disturb signs. One vast chamber holds everyone, and sleep is a shared ritual. The platforms sit just high enough to dodge floor drafts, but not so high they bleed heat clever, right? Most households treated these platforms as communal family beds. One side might hold the core kin group. Parents, children, maybe a grandparent, while the other side could be for hired hands, visiting relatives, or, in brutal weather, a bit of livestock riding out the frost. Sections could be marked by carved beams or suspended cloth, a kind of rustic privacy curtain, Viking chic. The message is unmistakable. Sleeping together isn't odd or awkward. It's how you survive and keep one another safe. Evenings began with bedding prep. Heavy wool blankets, scratchy, dense, and naturally insulating, were laid out first. Then came the pelts: bear, fox, elk, or sheep, if fortune smiled. Some homes added feather-stuffed pads and simple pillows, giving surprising softness. Archaeologists have found traces of bird feathers used as fil-bougie. Yes, but brilliant too. Anyone who has burrowed beneath a feather duvet knows how greedily it traps heat. Lighting stayed low and kind. No harsh glare, just animal fat candles or soapstone oil lamps. They cast a gentle amber flicker, enough to trace the outline of a loved one beside you, or follow the curling lines of carved beams overhead. Those carvings weren't random. They leaned into symbols of protection and vitality. Creatures, knots, serpents, ravens perched in timber shadows. Calm, not creepy. Mostly. The platforms did more than keep people warm. They signaled order. Sleeping higher and closer to the fire conferred a bit of status. The household head, or a respected elder, claimed the warmest spot, while children tended to curl along the outer edges, cocooned by adults into a kind of living, heated ring. The further from the hearth, the nearer to the chill of the timber walls. Motivation enough to stay on Grandpa's good side when snow set in. Little personal caches dotted the space. A carved wooden box at your feet might hold a comb, a trinket, maybe a modest piece of jewelry. Charms hung above a sleeper's Nook Thor's hammer for protection, a sun charm for bright dreams. One amulet found in Sweden is thought to ward off nightmares. A Viking take on a dream catcher, if you'll allow the anachronism. By day, the platforms doubled as work surfaces. Tools, baskets, a half-finished weaving, someone sharpening a blade. It all lived here. By sundown, the scene transformed. The fire was banked, blankets unfurled, and the hall sank into a hush, broken only by wood settling and the occasional murmur of sleep. And then there's the air. With this many lungs in one room, plus animals, stale air could have been a menace. Viking builders countered with smart airflow, roof vents, gaps near the gables, and small openings that let smoke slip out while warmth stayed in. There were no chimneys as we know them yet, but narrow slits and a high roofline kept most smoke above nose level. Still, opinions differ. Some scholars argue that winter air would have been borderline unbreathable by modern standards. Others credit the high ceilings and careful venting for a tolerable balance. Either way, it's a world apart from a sterile white bedroom. Less clinical, more elemental. One last construction detail says everything about their pragmatism. Those wooden platforms often had raised edges, like shallow boxes. When you're sleeping with 3 kids, a hunting dog, and a cousin who snores like Thor's hammer on granite, you don't want your pelts slithering onto cold boards at midnight. Frame kept bedding in place, and warmth right where it belonged. You settle back now, fur tucked under your chin. Feel a comfort that isn't about silence or luxury, but about rhythm and protection. The space shifts with the seasons, shields the body, and ties you to the people around you, sometimes quite literally, as bedding materials were handed down for generations. Next up, we'll move even closer to the heart of the coziness, the materials themselves. Because those Viking blankets might actually out-snuggle anything on your bed right now. Now let's turn to what made Viking bedding so unbelievably cozy. Tug the blanket closer. It's not some mass-produced cotton blend. It's dense wool woven tight, still carrying a faint, earthy scent of lanolin. That's sheep oil, the natural waterproofing that made Viking wool both durable and warm. A little musky? Sure, but it kept you alive. Wool was the household MVP. Sheep roamed nearly every farm, scruffy and weather-tough, their fleece thick enough to become either a sail or a sleeping bag. Women spent long hours spinning and weaving this wool into heavy blankets, more like flexible rugs than the airy throws we know today. They trapped heat, endured years of wear, and had the same calming weight we now call deep pressure comfort. The Vikings didn't know the science of serotonin or weighted blankets, but they perfected the feeling. Then came the furs, and these weren't just luxuries. Bear, reindeer, elk, wolf, or fox pelts layered over or under wool, depending on the season. The hair always faced inward, adding another pocket of insulation. In colder areas, people even stitched multiple hides together, lining them with wool or feathers to make fur sleeping sacks. Basically prehistoric sleeping bags. And if you were wealthy, you'd sleep like a northern monarch. Wool below, fur above, feathers at your head, and maybe a warm dog or another person beside you for extra body heat. Speaking of feathers pillows, not everyone had one, but those who did treated it like treasure. Archaeologists have uncovered feather-filled cushions from Scandinavian burial sites, often stuffed with duck or goose down and hand-stitched with care. They were passed down through families, even included in dowries. Imagine inheriting Grandma's pillow. It's soft, slightly smoky, and probably worth more than a sword. Poorer households made do with straw or hay bedding, layered under wool cloth or sheepskin. Not glamorous, but practical. Sometimes dried moss-filled mattresses, eco-friendly, biodegradable, and probably squeaky, but it worked. And here's a sensory surprise. Viking beds might have smelled amazing. Not like lavender detergent, but clean, woodsy, herbal. People stuffed bedding with juniper, thyme, or yarrow to deter lice and sweeten the air. They sometimes smoked the bedding over the hearth to dry it and add a pine resin aroma. You can almost smell that warm, forest fire scent drifting through the hall. Textiles were the domain of women masters of spinning, weaving, and dyeing. Massive upright looms stood inside the Longhouse, and weaving wasn't just domestic labor. It was wealth creation. A single blanket could take weeks to produce and was valuable enough to serve as currency. In Icelandic law, woven wool cloth measured in ells was legal tender. Your bedspread might literally be worth more than your sword. Not everyone agrees on how cushy Viking beds really were. Some scholars argue most people slept on simple hay mats with a token fur for warmth, while others insist comfort was a communal priority. Families pooling resources for at least one fine pelt. Either way, they layered everything smartly. Wool for insulation, fur for heat, feathers for softness, and each other for survival. You shift slightly on your imagined Viking sleeping platform. The wool beneath you is firm, but yielding. Your head sinks into a feather pillow softer than your memory foam monstrosity back home. Heat radiates from the hearth, filtered through pelts and planks. Every fiber around you was chosen, crafted, and cared for by hand. It's not sleek, it's not synthetic, but it's the kind of comfort that seeps straight into your bones. This was how Vikings slept, not just to rest, but to rebuild themselves in body and spirit. Wrapped in wool, fur, and warmth, they didn't merely survive the winter, they mastered it. Next, we'll turn to the element that made it all possible. Fire, the living heart of the Longhouse. The fire is low now, reduced to a soft orange glow beneath charred logs, but it's still the heartbeat of the Longhouse. Tonight, you're going to fall asleep, watching the flames twist and breathe, casting living shadows over beams carved with stories of ancestors. The Vikings didn't just live with fire, they lived through it. Every rhythm of their home and sleep was tuned to its glow. This wasn't some decorative fireplace. It was a shallow pit running down the center of the hall, fed by thick logs and carefully banked embers. It didn't roar. It pulsed. It breathed. Someone, often the elder or early riser of the household, would tend to it through the night, keeping the heat steady. The fire never fully died, even in summer. It was sacred and constant, the house's living soul. What's remarkable is how perfectly it synced with the human body. Modern science talks about circadian rhythms and blue light suppression, but the Vikings already had the answer. Firelight's deep amber tones are low lumen, red spectrum light, exactly what tells your brain it's time to rest. No harsh glare, no screens frying your eyes at midnight. Just warmth, flicker, and stillness. But fire wasn't without danger. Longhouses were built from timber, straw, and animal hair, a perfect recipe for disaster. The rafters blackened with soot over time, and in winter, when vents stayed shut tight, the air grew smoky fast. Too close to the hearth and you'd cough through the night. Too far and you'd freeze. So people arranged themselves in layers, the elderly, the sick, and children closer to the center, while the strong and healthy slept farther out, wrapped in heavy pelts. Still, the smoky air had its strange magic. The flicker of the flames threw shapes across the ceiling dragons, unfurling their wings, faces forming and vanishing, branches swaying in invisible wind. Children would fall asleep mid-story, eyes fixed on the glowing patterns. Adults might whisper prayers to Freya or Odin while stirring the coals. Some even believed dreams were shaped by the fire's movement, its rhythm, its warmth, its whisper through the dark. Certain woods and herbs were burned for more than light. Birch bark, juniper, and pine resin weren't just fuel. They scented the air and calmed the spirit. Juniper especially was believed to keep away evil spirits that prowled the night. Think of it as the Viking version of an essential oil diffuser, minus the marketing. Archaeologists debate just how smoky these spaces truly were. Some say the longhouses must have been unbearable in winter, the air thick and stinging. Others argue the vents, roof gaps, and carefully chosen fuel kept the balance just right. Enough smoke to preserve, to dry, and even to cleanse. There's even a theory that mild exposure helped toughen Viking lungs or ward off bacteria. Whether that's science or legend, who can say? You shift in your imagined nook, the fire's warmth reaching your back while the fur over your chest locks it in. The air smells faintly of pine, wood, and a hint of stew left to warm overnight. The gentle pop of a collapsing log is the only sound. This single fire is everything. Your stove, your heater, your nightlight, your protection. Gradually, your body unwinds. Muscles, sore from a day of chopping wood or hauling nets, begin to loosen. The fire's rhythm slows your breath until you're halfway between waking and dream. You're not falling asleep to electric hum or glowing alarms. You're falling asleep to the same light and warmth your ancestors trusted for thousands of years. That's the essence of Viking sleep. It wasn't just about where you lay, but about the entire sensory symphony temperature, scent, light, and sound, all blending into a perfect descent toward rest. As your eyes close, you hear a murmur across the room, a goat shifting in straw, the wind pressing softly against the walls. Outside, the world howls, but inside, it's peace. In the next section, we'll explore what happened before everyone drifted off the nightly social rituals that made Viking evenings feel so human, so warm, so strangely familiar. Evening in the Viking world wasn't just about collapsing into furs after a long, brutal day. It was a slow, communal, unwinding thick, with laughter, stories, and that wordless comfort that comes from belonging. If you're picturing a bunch of warriors grunting and passing out in exhaustion, think again. Viking nights were alive with ritual and connection, what you might call a kind of proto-hygge. As dusk settled, the same men and women who'd spent daylight battling wind, field, and sea now gathered closer to the hearth. The fire was coaxed into a steady blaze, throwing amber light across faces browned by the elements. Cloaks came off, boots lined up neatly, and someone ladled stew from a pot that had been simmering since noon. The smell of herbs, root vegetables, and fish filled the hall until it felt like the entire house was breathing warmth. Then the stories began. Not just fairy tales for children, though the little ones always crept close, but oral histories, myths, and memories. Tales of gods and giants, of ancestors and far-off voyages. The storyteller's voice rose and fell in rhythm with the fire's flicker, each word echoing off timber beams like an incantation. Jokes slipped in, too often bawdy, always familiar. Someone teased a neighbor about a goat that escaped 3 times last week. Another laughed over a clumsy fishing trip. You sit among them, not speaking, just listening. The crackle of the fire, the steady hum of voices, the soft crunch of bread, everything blurs into a warm, sleepy rhythm. Someone mends socks, another carves bone into jewelry. A child nods off in an elder's lap, no command to go to bed needed. Night simply folds around them. This wasn't just practicality, it was an anchor. In a world of long winters, uncertain seas, and unseen spirits, these nightly gatherings were how you held the dark at bay. When the storm outside howled, the warmth inside became holy. That closeness was its own kind of protection. There's a lovely fringe fact here. Vikings believed that storytelling itself was a form of magic. The spoken word carried power. To name your ancestors aloud was to keep them present, to weave them into the night. So those bedtime tales weren't mere entertainment. They were acts of memory, of continuity, of faith. Modern scholars are only now beginning to study this softer side of Viking life. For centuries, history obsessed over their raids and ships. But what about the quiet hours after the oars were stowed? How did kinship, nightly storytelling, and shared rest shape their emotional world. Increasingly, researchers think that the emotional intimacy of communal living knowing you were surrounded by people you trusted led to deeper, safer sleep. It's almost ironic. We have private bedrooms, soundproof walls, and memory foam mattresses, and yet so many of us lie awake, restless, alone. The Vikings, wrapped in furs and voices, probably drifted off faster. You lean back, full from stew and warmth, your head heavy, the low murmur of talk fading to whispers. Someone tucks a blanket over a child's shoulder. A dog sighs and curls at your feet. No one performs this ritual. It simply happens every night, the way the fire burns or the stars turn overhead. Maybe togetherness wasn't just survival. Maybe it was joy. Knowing that as darkness pressed in, you were inside, among your people, held in light. The edges between yourself and the group blur a little. That sense of safety seeps deep into your bones. When you finally close your eyes, it lingers. Outside, the wind claws at the door. Inside, someone snores softly, a gentle, reassuring reminder that you're not alone. The world beyond can wait until morning. In the final section, we'll see how all this fire, story, work, and warmth set the stage for the deepest, most earned sleep imaginable. The sleep of a Viking after a day's hard labor. You don't simply drift into sleep after a Viking day. You collapse into it, body and spirit spent in the best possible way. Their lives weren't built around comfort, but around constant motion. That motion shaped their rest. Muscles ached, lungs burned, and yet when night came, every fiber of the body was primed for deep, dream-heavy slumber. Forget gym memberships or 10,000-step goals. Viking life was an all-day, full-body workout, from the first gray light of dawn to the last spark fading in the hearth. When the morning arrived, there was no alarm clock, only the slow brightening through the roof vents and the muffled rustle of the household waking. Boots shuffled over packed earth. People stretched, grumbled, then got to work without hesitation. Work, for them, wasn't symbolic or optional. It was survival. You might be plowing a frost-hardened field behind an ox, splitting firewood, hauling water in clay jars, or repairing a leaking thatch. If you were a sailor or raider, you were out on the sea, rowing for hours in freezing wind, soaked in salt spray, hands blistered, body trembling from exertion. Every motion was purposeful. Every muscle mattered. Vikings didn't rely on convenience. They were the convenience. Food didn't appear in crates or baskets. It came from the trap you set or the net you wove. Every cloak, sail, or blanket was born of work, shearing, spinning, weaving. Even the act of keeping a home warm meant chopping, hauling, feeding, and tending fire. There were no idle calories, no empty hours. By the time dusk arrived, the fatigue wasn't the modern kind. The jittery, screen-fed kind that keeps your mind spinning even as your body rests. It was clean exhaustion, the kind earned by movement, cold air, and necessity. The kind that tells every nerve it's safe to shut down. And when the night rituals ended, stories told, bowls emptied, embers banked, that exhaustion met the perfect conditions for rest. Heavy wool blankets pressed down, muscles sank into firm straw or soft fur, and the warmth from shared bodies did the rest. Sleep came not as an interruption, but as a continuation of the day's rhythm. It's no wonder historians call it some of the deepest rest in human history. There were no glowing screens, no buzzing alerts, no street lamps confusing the body's clock. Only darkness, warmth, and silence, broken by the wind's sigh through the rafters or the quiet stir of someone shifting nearby. You can almost feel it now, the dull throb in your arms after a day of work. the soreness that somehow feels satisfying. You stretch once, twice, then let it all go. The fire murmurs softly. Your breath sinks with the others around you. And for a moment, everything is still. This is what real rest feels like. Not luxury, but harmony between labor and reward, body and environment, self and community. The Vikings didn't need sleep aids or supplements. They had rhythm, ritual, and the raw, honest peace of having earned their dreams. So you drift, not just asleep, but home. Wrapped in warmth, surrounded by quiet breath and steady firelight. Outside, winter rages. Inside, everything is safe, soft, and timeless. The Longhouse exhales, and the night begins again. By evening, your muscles feel loose and weighty. Blood has pushed through every capillary, and your nervous system slides into that blissful post-effort calm. Today's scientists would call it your parasympathetic system, taking over the deep rest mode that counters stress and lets the body repair. Back then, it was simply life. Here's a fringe fact. Viking skeletons from archaeological digs often show heavy wear in joints, spines, and knees, evidence of a physically demanding existence. Yet many also display marks of long-term healing, suggesting they didn't just break down. They adapted. They recovered. They weren't ruined nightly. They built resilience, toughness, and likely a knack for deep, muscle-mending sleep. Of course, routines varied. Women often worked as hard as men, just in different forms. Weaving was no dainty pastime. It demanded core strength and hours on your feet. Cooking meant grinding grain by hand, lifting cauldrons, tending fires all day. Children started early, too, herding goats, hauling water. By dusk, no matter your role, you felt it, arms, legs, back all tired, not injured, simply ready to rest. Some scholars question whether Vikings truly slept better. With pain, infection, cold, wouldn't slumber suffer? That's the debate. One side argues chronic aches and untreated injuries disrupted rest, especially for elders. The other counters that a life spent outdoors, physically engaged, and aligned with natural cycles could yield better quality sleep, despite a few sore joints. Lying now in your fur-lined bed, you likely don't feel pain, you feel spent. Not screen-fried or desk-stiff, but cleanly worn out from motion. Your nervous system thanks you. Cortisol ebbs, heart rate settles, muscles release. You're not counting sheep, you're blending into the herd. Even the daily timing helped. There was no late-night email blitz or midnight scrolling. When the chores were done and the sun was gone, the body listened. Tiredness wasn't an obstacle. It was proof the day had been well used. That fatigue didn't just speed up falling asleep, it probably deepened it. The body in need of repair seeks the lower stages more readily. You sleep deeper, dream harder, stay under longer. And you wake not to a screeching alarm, but to the quiet breath of a Longhouse stirring back to life. So here you are, heavy-limbed, cocooned in wool and fur, warmed by the fire and by the day itself. Your legs twitch with aftershocks of movement. Your mind is blank, no lists, no mail, no blue light, just the satisfaction that everything you did had purpose. Your body earned this rest in the most elemental, beautiful way. In the next section, we head into the deep dark, the kind you can't picture unless you've lived without electricity. In the Viking world, long winter nights weren't a seasonal hassle. They were a sacred gift to sleep. Let's see what happens when the sun fades for weeks and darkness becomes your lullaby. Darkness. True darkness. Velvet over your eyes, over the roof, over the whole world. That's what you meet entering the long winter night in the far north. You think you know dark, but unless you've spent weeks without a sun, without even a pale smear on the horizon, you haven't felt this. Near the Arctic Circle, the sun didn't just set. It disappeared for days, sometimes longer. At best, a dim twilight at midday. Mostly, winter turned life into one long dusk. You might imagine such a night drives people mad. A frozen horror story. Instead, it primes the body for sleep. Deep, unbroken, restorative, a kind of hibernation. And it was glorious. You wake slowly, not from disturbance, but because your body has finished its shift in dreamland. No sunbeam crawls across the floor. There's only a subtle change in the fire's warmth, the hush of someone turning beside you, the rustle of wool as a blanket shifts. You blink into darkness and recognize it's still night. Of course it is. You've slept who knows how long, yet the sky remains heavy and starless, the air colder, and your body whispers, "Not yet." Here's where the relationship with dark gets interesting. Without artificial light, circadian rhythms synced almost perfectly with nature. When darkness stretched 20 hours a day, the body adapted. It didn't struggle, it slowed, it slept longer. Winter wasn't only about resisting cold, it was about resting deeply and often. When the sun vanished, so did urgency. Fringe fact, in the deepest winters, some Norse communities shifted their daily cadence. People woke briefly to eat or do light chores, then slept again. No rigid timetable, just tidal motion. Rise a little, ebb back into sleep. Today we call it biphasic or polyphasic sleep. Back then, it was simply how life moved. You followed the dark because your body wanted to. It wasn't only the amount of sleep, it was the quality. In long, dark, and cold, melatonin pours in. That hormone doesn't just start sleep. It helps govern depth, duration, and dream vividness. With fewer disruptions and no light pollution, Viking winters likely flooded the brain with it. You know those mornings when you wake with no memory of falling asleep, as if you never moved, a blank, peaceful stretch. That was many midwinter nights. Not everyone paints it as a slumber utopia. Some argue the prolonged dark could trigger seasonal depression, especially where food or firewood ran short. Fair. But the counterpoint is that slowing down conserved energy. People ate less, moved less, and yes, slept more. Long sleep wasn't laziness, it was strategy. You stir on the platform, wrapped in furs. It's impossible to tell if it's morning, night, or between, which is the point. The hall stays dim. A few whispers, someone adding a log. The red glow brightens, then settles. You could get up, but you don't. Rest isn't shameful, it's expected. Your body is conserving warmth, rebuilding fiber and will. Outside frozen and still. Inside quiet breath and gentle sleep. Another curious note. Many Norse believed the long dark thinned the boundary between worlds. Dreams carried weight. Night had power. You might wake from seeing your grandfather in the snow, or a god striding a frozen sea. You'd share it at the next waking. Dreams weren't dismissed. They were noted, sometimes acted upon. The deeper the sleep, the deeper the dream, the more you brought back. With the sun gone, light itself became sacred. Fire wasn't only heat, it was hope. Keeping the hearth alive marked a center. A mental landmark, everyone oriented to it. Without that flame, you'd lose track. With it, even days of darkness had a pulse. Hours pass. You wake again, sip something warm, stretch, yawn, and sink back down. You're not idle. You're living the rhythm nature hands you. The dark says rest, so you do. We like to imagine constant motion chopping wood, fighting trolls, rowing hard for England. Truthfully, part of Viking strength came from knowing when not to push, when to lie still and let the body rebuild beneath layers of fur while the world outside turned black and silent. You burrow deeper, breath fogging just a little. You're not resisting the night. You're resting in it. Maybe what your modern life needs is less war with darkness and more surrender to it, letting it wrap you, shut you down, and carry you gently into the next dream. In the next section, we'll talk about the sounds of a Viking. Night not noises that keep you awake, but ones that lull you under. Sea winds and animal murmurs, the northern soundscape that might be the best white noise machine you've never tried. It's the kind of night that hums at the edges of your hearing. Not silent, not loud, just textured. You're wrapped in furs, hovering in that liminal space between waking and sleep. And what holds you there like a steady palm on your chest is sound. Not the harsh buzz of streetlights, not a phone's chirp, not traffic or TV bleeding through walls. This is a Viking night everything and nothing at once. Start with the wind. Outside, it sweeps over frozen fields and hills in long, steady gusts. The sea isn't far. You can smell it even unseen. On certain nights, waves pound rocky shorelines, slow, rhythmic like a giant creature sleeping. It doesn't keep you awake. It roots you. The thatch rattles, but the walls don't protest. The Longhouse is built for this. Thick logs, tight planks, moss jammed in every seam. You're warm. You're safe. The wind sings you down. Then the animals. Livestock rest nearby, not only for convenience, but to lend their heat. On a quiet night, you hear a cow shifting, a horse stamping once, chickens murmuring in a feathery heap. A dog curls at your feet and twitches, chasing whatever dogs chase spirits, Thor, or a very persistent rabbit. Comforting, all of it. These aren't intrusions. They're the house's heartbeat. Odd, delightful fringe fact. Cats were everywhere in Viking homes, Mousers. Yes, but also magical, protective, tied to Freya. The soft scratch on timber, the sudden warmth sliding into your blankets. That purr is an organic white noise machine with mythic credentials, and modern studies even suggest it reduces stress and aids healing. The human chorus soothes too. Gentle snores across the room, not a chainsaw, just breath rising and falling with the firelight. Someone mutters in sleep, shifts under blankets. A baby fusses briefly, then quiets under a mother's hush and the soft bounce of feet on wood. No panic, no annoyance. Night interruptions are normal. You respond, resettle, drift again. Over everything is the fire. Low, constant, never entirely silent. A crackle here, coals sliding there. A faint hiss where heat meets cold. It's not loud, not sharp. It marks time like a living metronome. You could fall asleep to the fire alone. You probably do. Some seasons add their own notes. Wolves far off, haunting rather than threatening. Owls calling in trees, the creak of an ice-laden bough. None of it jolts you awake. You grew up with these sounds. You know which mean safety and which mean caution. Tonight, everything says safe. Modern sleep science worries about noise pollution, how small disturbances can fracture REM and leave you foggy. The Vikings lacked soundproofing, but they had consistency. The Longhouse's sounds were predictable, organic, reassuring. That consistency is grounding. No horns, no sirens, just the same soft chorus every night. It reinforced ritual as well. You didn't bed down in a new, unfamiliar space each night. You returned to something known. Your body learned the cue. Rustle of fur, breath of others, sigh of wind sleep. The loop was hardwired. The goat coughs once, and your brain answers, "Ah, time to dream." There's a scholarly pushback. With so many bodies in one hall, surely it was too chaotic for deep rest. The counterpoint is strong communal sounds aren't intrusions when you live communally. They're signals of safety. In a dangerous world, the noise of family, herd, and fire is a lullaby. Silence, by contrast, hints at danger, emptiness, abandonment. You don't filter the sound, you welcome it. So you lie there, wrapped in warmth, surrounded by murmurs and rustles, and a fire that never quite dies. The soundscape is full but gentle, layered without overwhelm. Everything you hear affirms belonging your place in the circle, your tie to land and kin. No earplugs, no gadgets. Just this living northern white noise. Your breathing slows to match the room. The fire, the sleepers, the dog, the wind. It holds you and says, you can rest now. We're all here. Nothing will come for you tonight. In the next section, we drift toward the mystical. For Vikings, sleep wasn't merely rest. It was a doorway. Dreams weren't random. They were signs, visits, and messages. We'll see how the North treated the sleeping mind as communion with something larger. Somewhere inside your sleep, something shifts. Not your body, warm and still under heavy wool and fur, but your mind. The fire whispers. The Longhouse breathes. Within, a passage opens, space that wasn't there a moment ago. For a Viking, dreams aren't leftover scraps of memory. They're bridges, messages, glimpses through the veil. And now you're crossing. In Norse culture, sleep and dreams weren't trivial. They carried warnings, blessings, fate. You'd wake not with a shrug, but a pounding heart, already rehearsing how to retell it at breakfast. Who appeared? What signs hovered just beyond reach? Some believed part of the self the Huger could wander during sleep, visiting others, slipping into dreams, bearing omens or receiving them. Your body spent the day hauling nets, cutting wood, eating stew. Your Huger rises like mist and goes. Where it travels varies. Perhaps you meet your grandmother, gone 2 winters now, sitting by a hearth that isn't yours, humming a lost song. She doesn't speak, just looks at you. You wake with her face imprinted and carry that silence all day. Was it warning, blessing, a call to live better? Or you dream of a mountain collapsing into the sea, a raven flying backward, wolves pacing in a circle. These aren't weird dreams. They might mean something. The village Volva, trained to read fate's threads, may be consulted. She listens, casts runes, and says, be wary of strangers, or courage will be tested, or prepare to travel. The sleeping mind speaks a language the waking mind forgets, and still, everyone listens. Some dreams cut closer. The lost lover returns. You kiss, you dance in snow, you wake aching. No one scoffs. There is no just a dream. The line between sleep and waking is porous. Something leaves, something enters. In sagas and poetry, dreams pivot, fates. Kings see death, heroes receive quests, whole battles are foretold. Whether literary device or lived belief, many Norse treated dreams as messages, not noise. You turn beneath your blankets, firelight paints your closed lids. Wind moans low outside, almost a voice. The hall is quiet, but never empty. Ancestors are near. Land spirits pass. Vikings believed in the Draugr, the restless dead, but also in helpful presences. Guardians of home and field, the dead who still loved you enough to visit. Recurring dreams could prompt change. A move, a child's new name, offerings to a slighted god. Night could decide what day would do. Modern scholars split superstition or a lost respect for the inner world. Maybe both. The Norse stance suggests dreams hold signal, not only static. Tonight you hover between stages. A tree with silver leaves whispers your name in a familiar voice. You open your eyes to low fire and sleeping kin, chest heavy with a feeling you can't name. Perhaps you'll ask the old woman at the village edge what silver leaves mean. For Vikings, dreaming wasn't decoration. It shaped the night as surely as fur and flame. To sleep was to travel, and the destination was never guaranteed. Next comes the social map of sleeping Howage, and roll set your spot and warmth. But that's for the next passage. Not everyone in a Viking longhouse slept the same way. Yes, it was communal, one roof, one fire, one breath shared in the dark. But where you put your head said a lot about who you were. Age, status, and role arranged the night into a quiet, fur-lined hierarchy. Closest to the hearth prime territory lay the elders, the matriarch or patriarch, ringed by grandkids like little blankets with feet. Practical and symbolic at once, they needed the warmth most, and they were the keepers of memory. To sleep near them was to sleep near the family's heart. Next came the household heads, the ones running fields and family, swinging axes and birthing babies. Their bedding was often shared, two adults wrapped beneath heavy layers, children tucked along the sides like living hot water bottles. Their rest was sacred, but frequently interrupted. A child fussing, a goat snoring, a fire needing a nudge. They woke easily, and just as easily slipped back under. Resilience was their superpower. Children had the edges, not in the icy corners, but rarely center stage. They dozed in snug bundles of wool and fur, wrapped in a parent's cloak or curled beside siblings. Privacy wasn't the point. Belonging was. Sleep wasn't solitary. It was part of the household organism, breathing and growing together. Teenagers were a mixed case. Older sons might bed down near stores or with farmhands, already tipping toward a life where boats would be more bed than bench. Daughters nearing marriage could still sleep with family, but tucked a bit apart near an aunt or grandmother. In some wealthier homes, carved partitions or small box beds were set into walls' cozy niches, just big enough to roll and whisper secrets. Not true solitude, but its suggestion. Spiritual role mattered too. A vulva seer or wise woman might receive a quieter corner, a space to dream more deeply without the chorus of snoring goats and fishermen. People believed her visions ranged farther. She might sleep surrounded by charms, herbs, or ancestral tokens. Servants and thralls were there as well, usually at the far end, farther from the hearth. Bedding was simpler straw, a thin wool layer, but still within the same pulse of fire and wind. The hall lacked hard walls. Even the humblest slept inside the same rhythm. Quirky fringe note from saga lore. One woman's bed was said to be so layered with blankets and pelts that 3 people were needed to make it. Comfort was status. Warmth at 2 a.m. was wealth on display. Some beds stacked fur on wool, on feather on fur again, until the sleeper vanished into a soft Norse lasagna. Runes might be carved into a chieftain's headboard for strength and protection. Animal motifs guarded children's spots. When someone died, their bedding might be burned or buried with them, an upholstered farewell into the next world. Were these rules rigid? Not always. Survival trumped protocol. A feverish baby moved closer to the fire. A bad back earned a warmer berth for a night. The Longhouse was a living system. Ordered, yes, but flexible when winter pressed its case. You wake, not to a shrieking alarm, but to your body's calm. Yes. Embers glow low. A veil of light slips through a seam above the door. Someone yawns across the hall. Another tugs a blanket tighter. No clatter, no panic, just a gentle rise from sleep to waking, like smoke lifting. There were no clocks here, no sundials on the rafters, no sand glasses ticking beside a bedroll. Rhythm and instinct did the job. Days weren't chopped into 7:30 wake-ups and apt-defined shutdowns. They followed light, warmth, hunger, and movement. Your inner clock set itself to the sky. You stretch quietly, stiffness melting from limbs. A warm cup is pressed into your hand's thin broth, or water warmed at the fire. It's not coffee. You don't need coffee. You're not recovering from neon-lit insomnia. You're simply rebooting after a full cycle, maybe two of slow, deep, unapologetic sleep. One secret here is that Vikings didn't treat bedtime as a performance. No apps, no masks, no doom scroll. Sleep was a phase in the day's tide. The world quieted. You lay down. The world stirred. You rose. Simple. And you were part of it, not fighting it. Summer nudged you up early, even after a late night. Light alone coaxed you awake. It seeped in through cracks and smoke holes. No blackout curtains. No pretending it was midnight. Your brain read the brightness, reset hormones, and you surfaced. No alarm required. Winter was the opposite. No sunrise to yank you from blankets. You rose with the household instead. Someone stoked the fire. Food smells returned. A pot scraped softly. A low song drifted. The room woke before you did and invited you along. Final fringe fact. Some Norse homes used time-marked candles or drip bowls as water clocks, not to wake, but to pace rituals, ceremonies, or feasts. Ordinary waking was sensory birds starting up, a temperature shift as coals cooled, the feel of bedding when the body decided, enough. And that's the whole rhythm. Place, season, work, and kin, converging each night into a sleep that rebuilt bone and spirit, and each morning into a waking without violence. No buzzers, no blinking digits, just ember light, breath, and the surety that day follows night as faithfully as warmth follows flame. And the Vikings didn't seem to mind waking at slightly different times from day to day. Their lives weren't run by micromanaged hours. They were ruled by tasks that rose and fell with the season. If the sheep stirred, you fed them. If the boat needed bailing, you handled it before the tide. No Fitbit, just instinct. That's what makes the Viking approach to sleep and waking feel so elegant. It wasn't optimization, it was integration. They weren't tracking REM stages or hacking rest with gadgets. They lived in ways that lined up with how a human body naturally wants to function. They didn't bolt up in panic. They woke in context. Because they didn't dread the start of the day, they didn't stall it. No snooze buttons, no muttered curses under fur. Groans, sure everyone gets stiff, but not resistance. More like, all right, body, let's move again. You sit up, cloak over your shoulders. The person beside you is still asleep. You leave them be. No need. Their rhythm will lift them when it's time. If you wonder whether this rhythm actually worked, whether people really rose on time without clocks, remember, these were the hands that built ships with no blueprints, navigated by stars and birds, and ran massive farming calendars. They weren't casual. They just didn't need watches to be precise. Scholars still argue about uniformity. Some say elite households ran tighter schedules. Servants timed. Messengers sent at set hours. Others insist even the wealthy followed natural cues more than rigid timetables. Either way, the core held. Sleep and waking belong to a flow, not a chopped-up task list. Back in your longhouse, you stand slowly. Your legs remember fields. Your back remembers firewood. There's no dread, no theft. You feel finished, like a loaf pulled from the oven at the exact right moment. Your body says, that was enough. You stretch, step toward the hearth, and begin the day without pushback, just quiet readiness. Now we're going to slip deeper into the Viking dreamscape. Because if you fell in battle, you didn't just hope for a proper burial, you hoped for a proper dream after. Let's talk about Valhalla, the vision of eternal sleep and waking that warriors whispered to themselves in the dark before closing their eyes. It's late again in the Longhouse. The fire has settled into glowing coals, and the air carries that familiar braid of smoke, wool, and salted wood. You lie beneath your furs as hush spreads like mist. But before your mind lets go, before you cross into the dreaming place, one thought rises, quiet and bright. Will I wait tomorrow? And if not, Where will I go? For Vikings, sleep and death weren't distant cousins. They were twins, each a journey elsewhere, each a moment when the soul might loosen. Above all dreams one towered, Valhalla. Valhalla wasn't just an afterlife, it was a sleep fantasy. A hall of eternal rest and readiness, where warriors slept deep, rose shining, and feasted without end. Fight each day, die with honor, wake unscarred, laugh, drink, sleep, repeat. For someone who braved cold seas and real battlefields, that was the best outcome. Death with purpose, rest with reward. Lying in your longhouse, knowing another voyage could come soon, or the next raid could be the last. Dream wraps around you like an extra pelt. Not a whim, a promise. Live well, die bravely, and you'll sleep again in the greatest hall among Odin's chosen. Some believe the way you slept in this life hinted at the next. Sleep too long and soft, and perhaps Freya's hall fit you better than Odin's. Sleep like a warrior, deeply, sparingly, with readiness in your bones, and the gods would note your discipline. Dreams might even preview what awaited. The afterlife was layered. Valhalla for those fallen in battle. Folkvanger, Freya's field. For others, broad and beautiful. And hell, not a fiery inferno, but a colder, still place, peaceful in its own way. Yet Valhalla held the imagination. A vast golden hall, shields for a ceiling, spears for rafters, meat never gone, roasts always turning, beds soft and warm, lined with honor. For the proven, this wasn't fluff. It was earned, sleep salted with valor. Burial mounds sometimes echoed longhouses, so the soul felt at home. Some were buried with bedding fur and woven blankets, because comfort belonged even in final rest. You blink up at low beams. Maybe a carving rides the timber. Odin on Sleipnir, or Thor with his hammer raised. Not decor anchors. Sleep wasn't mere recovery. It was one point in a cycle. Dream, wake, fight, feast, sleep again. The body rested, the soul prepared. Sagas spoke of those who dreamed their deaths, who saw Valhalla before blood was shed. Some took it as warning, some as comfort. Even for non-warriors, the dream cycle mattered. A farmer might hope for ancestors' halls. A mother might long to hold a lost child. Dreams didn't sit on the sidelines. They staged the future. Scholars debate the literalness metaphor, narrative tool, social spur. Perhaps. But its steady presence in sagas, carvings, and verse hints at belief beneath. At minimum, they hoped, and hope shapes dreams. Quieter thought lingers. Maybe this life was close enough. You eat, sleep, fight, love, share warmth with kin, dog, and child. Hear stories by firelight, and drift without fear. Maybe you don't need golden walls. Maybe the longhouse, crackling and calm, is its own afterlife. Close your eyes. The fire pops. Someone shifts. Wind hums outside. And you think, if this is my last sleep, let me dream well. Let me see the hall, let me rest in honor. Peace settles like snow. You've earned it, not just by deed, but by faith. Next comes the Viking paradox. Despite freezing winds and brutal nights, the cold actually made sleep better. Cold air brushes your nose as you stir under the furs. Your first thought isn't alarm, it's clarity. Fingers peeking from the blanket feel just cool enough to remind you you're alive, while the rest of you is perfectly warm. Here's one of the Viking sleep secrets. The cold wasn't the enemy, it was the asset. Modern bedrooms chase warmth insulation, central heat, electric throws. But in a longhouse, winter temperatures might hover only just above freezing. No glass panes, no rubber seals, just heavy timber, a steady draft, and your own ability to adapt. And somehow, you sleep like a hibernating bear. The paradox is simple. Cooler air can improve sleep quality. When When the body cools slightly, a cascade follows. Heart rate lowers, metabolism dips, melatonin rises, and the brain gets the message, shut down. You drop into deeper stages faster and stay there longer. Without reading a single paper, Vikings had the effect dialed in. You're swaddled in layers that breathe yet trap heat where it counts. Fur beneath, wool above, maybe another hide on top. Your breath fogs faintly, but your core stays toasty. That contrast cool face, warm body flips the nervous system switch. Not panic, rest. This wasn't a spa. Winters were savage. Snow banked against walls, wind ripped the fjords, ice locked rivers. Cold sleeping wasn't always romantic, but they worked with nature, not against it. The Longhouse managed extremes with thick logs, turf roof, low ceilings to hold heat, and a central hearth kept banked all night. It was never toasty end-to-end warmth pooled near the fire and thinned at the edges, so people closest to the hearth were comfortable. Those farther out layered up or shared heat. Bodies acclimated. Group sleep wasn't just social, it was thermal engineering. Multiple bodies under shared covers meant higher warmth. Children nestled between parents or siblings. Animals inside added degrees to the room. Bedding materials matched the climate. Wool insulated even damp. Fur, bear, elk, fox offered breathable luxury. Feather pads softened the chill from planks. Sleeping clothed was normal. Risks existed. Frostbite, illness in extremes. But the cold air itself often reduced pathogens and calmed inflammation. Colder rooms are linked with better immune tone and lower inflammatory markers. Whether chosen or endured, the Norse optimized it. Warm where it matters, cool where it helps. No stuffy air, no tossing, just crisp breath and steady heat. You tug the blanket to your chin and feel the perfect balance. Nose tingling, body in a private climate of bliss. No vents blasting, only your own radiant heat, and the comfort of a hearth still glowing if you need it. Some theories even link deeper, cooler sleep, to longer, more vivid dreams, useful in a world where dreams were messages. You realize modern sleep culture may have missed the point. Maybe it's not about more heat. It's about smarter simplicity. Less gadget, more fur and fire. Another Viking bedtime secret came before bed. Heat and steam. Think of a bathhouse or sauna steam, ribboning upward, air thick with warmth, and the sharp scent of birch. You sit on a damp, smooth bench. Every breath expands your chest and leaves as a soft hiss. You haven't reached bed, but your body is already unclenching, primed to surrender tonight. This isn't a modern spa. It's a Viking sauna central to rest as much as furs and firelight. Yes, Vikings used saunas. Not only sea rovers, they were steam lovers, scrubbers, and sweat bath devotees. These were sacred feeling spaces, earthy, stone-lined, sometimes sunk into the ground. The badstoffa wasn't just for getting clean. It was ritual, community, and one of the best sleep tools they had. Evening comes after hauling nets, chopping wood, or weaving till shoulders burn, hands raw, face salted with sweat and soot. Before bed, you head for the heat knot alone. Family, friends, neighbors join. Modesty worked differently. Practicality ruled. Stones heated in a central pit were doused to throw waves of steam. Bundled birch switches brushed skin, stinging, then soothing. Flushing the blood, releasing tension. You sweat until the day leaves your body. And the patterns held year after year, generation after generation. You slept near your mother when small, edged outward as you took on work. Then, if you were lucky and long-lived, circled back near the fire children at your knees, dreaming the dreams you once had. You scan the Longhouse. A boy grips a carved wooden horse. A girl mumbles and kicks off a blanket. The old man by the hearth hasn't moved in hours, chest rising like a tide. This is more than a room of sleepers. It's a living diagram of Norse life spelled in bedding. It works, it breathes, it keeps people warm, safe, and bound together. Sleep isn't solo here, it's communal. A small, fur-draped universe orbiting one steady flame. Now for something wonderfully odd. The Midnight Gap. Vikings didn't always sleep in a single block. Many early European sources, Scandinavia included, describe biphasic rest. 2 sleeps with a wakeful stretch between. You'd lie down after sunset, sleep hard for 3 or 4 hours, wake naturally calm, not rattled, stay up for an hour or 2, then drift into second sleep until dawn. In that gap, you weren't insomniac, you were present. People prayed, tended quiet chores, checked the fire, mended clothes, stretched sore limbs. You might sit by the coals and whisper about dreams, plans, or nothing at all. Intimacy often found its moment here. Some texts suggest this was a favored time for couples to slip closer. No rushing. This interval wasn't an interruption. It belonged to the rhythm. Your body expected it. And yielding to it didn't ruin rest. It deepened it. 2 entries into dream instead of 1. Why? Remove artificial light, and the brain leans towards segmented sleep. With only sun and fire, circadian patterns settle into 2 blocks. In other words, the Viking pattern may have been the healthier default all along. So you sit up, tug on a wool tunic, tiptoe to the hearth. Someone passes a clay cup warm milk maybe. A few others are awake, faces soft with sleep. Someone murmurs an old tale about a seal who became a woman and slipped back beneath the ice. At this hour it feels truer, closer. The gap was spiritual, too. The veil felt thin. Offerings were sometimes left. A heel of bread, a splash of mead, a carved token. The wind outside holds its breath. Anything might be walking out there. References in later lore talk about this stretch as a window for insight. Verses composed, choices clarified, omens read. Not productivity as we know it, but quiet intelligence. Some calendars and runic notes even mark first sleep and second sleep, especially in winter. Prayers and blessings were timed to this hinge of night. Not all agree on scope. Some think it varied by season or region. But across centuries, the idea persists. Waking in the night wasn't a flaw. It was a gift. The drowsiness returns, soft weight behind the eyes. Limbs slacken. Someone has already sunk down and pulled furs close. You follow, fire's glow dancing behind your lids. Second sleep is often deepest. Surface rest burned off. Words said to gods, to wind, to the person by the coals. You sink without effort, as if falling backward into warm black water. Time gets strange up north. You wake to what should be morning, yet there's no burst of gold, only a dim blue haze leaking through timber seams and the lingering warmth of a low fire. You don't check a clock, you feel the hour. In the Viking latitudes, seasons rewrite how sleep works. Winter stretches night to 18, 20 hours or more, near the Arctic circle-layered cycles of long, slow rest, drifting between dreams and brief wakings. Roll the year forward, and another extreme arrives. The sun refuses to leave. Welcome to the summer of midnight sun. Depending on where you live, the sun may never truly set for weeks. It dips, then turns and rises, looping like a sleepless star. Light pours everywhere. Fields, water, roof cracks endlessly. You'd think sleep would shatter, but Vikings flowed with it. Summer rest grew shorter, more flexible, scattered in smaller naps. Some slept deeply a few hours past midnight, and again mid-afternoon. Others pushed longer waking stretches and crashed hard later. Not a schedule or rhythm. You live more outdoors. Snow is gone. The air smells of pine and soil. Days swarm with fishing, boat repair, lambing, long hill treks. Urgency rides the season. The growing window is brief. Sleep shifts, not neglected, adjusted. Lighter bedding, open vents, cleaner air. You still sleep near the hearth, now for comfort and smoke to confuse mosquitoes. Herbs dry in bundles overhead. Wildflowers sit in a wooden bowl by the fire. The sky glows gold at night, and still your body winds down, because need, not clocks, governs rest. Some note that northern timekeeping tracked light behavior. When twilight lasted all night, when the sun first stopped setting, people read the sky for sowing, for reaping, for resting. The kind of time modern clocks can't provide. Scholars split on whether Vikings truly slept less in summer. Some say they kept farmer hours. Others point to split sleep and late play under a sun that wouldn't quit. Either way, the society pulsed with light and still found rest. You pull wool to your chest and close your eyes at noon-bright dusk. Sleep doesn't have to be a fight. It can be a dance shifting with season, weather, and the story your body tells that day. And now a nightcap. When the sun lingered and the fire burned low, sometimes Vikings leaned on a little help. Mead, mushrooms, herbs. Nature's own sleep aids with a dash of magic. You've finished supper-stewed greens, a chunk of salted meat, and a horn comes your way. Not the blowing kind. This one's hollowed, polished, and filled with golden liquid that smells of apples and flowers. It's mead, the drink of poets and warriors, of hearth talk and fading light. You sip warmth, sweetness, a faint burn at the back of the throat. Not just a drink, a ritual, easing you toward rest. They didn't have sleep teas on a shelf, but they had mead, and they had mushrooms and herbs, brewed by women who knew which leaf or root could settle a restless body. Sleep was survival, and, like everything in Norse life, it drew on the land's gifts and a little homely alchemy. Start with mead, the star of the scene, fermented honey with water, sometimes spices or fruit. It wasn't only for feasts. In many homes, it was a nightly staple. Mead wasn't just for revelry. It was medicine, lullaby, and social glue in one amber cup. Honey was sacred to the Norse. It came from bees seen as gifts of the gods, tiny messengers between worlds. To drink what they made was to take in sunlight and summer, condensed into warmth. And mead did more than ease the tongue. It relaxed the mind. A few hornfuls softened the edges of the day, slowed the pulse, and made the transition to sleep feel natural, not forced. But honey wine wasn't the only path to peace. Across the north, women kept small stores of dried herbs and roots, each with a quiet purpose. Chamomile and yarrow for calming, valerian for heavier rest, mint to soothe the gut after long meals, and wild hops. Yes, the same that would later flavor beer, to hush an anxious mind. Some were brewed into teas, others packed into small linen sachets and tucked beneath bedding so their scent could drift through the night. There are sagas that mention Side-Kunur-wise women mixing sleep drafts before long voyages or during restless winters. These weren't potions in the fairy tale sense, but careful infusions, part science, part faith. Birch bark, honey, and crushed berries might go into the bowl, stirred until it caught the fire's glow. A sip brought warmth from throat to stomach, a feeling of calm readiness, the sense that tomorrow could wait. And then there were the mushrooms. Northern forests offered several kinds, and not all were meant for feasting. Some, used sparingly, deepened dreams' colors vivid, sensations strange, like a waking vision. These were handled with reverence and caution, often by those who believed dreams could reveal omens. To sleep under their spell was to walk closer to the divine. Even without herbs or mead, the Vikings approached rest with ritual awareness. Before lying down, Someone might hum a short verse, a charm for safety, a thanks for warmth. Sometimes they simply whispered a wish for calm seas, for good weather, for dreams without shadows. It wasn't superstition so much as gratitude. In the flickering light of the hearth, a family might pass one last horn around, taking small sips, trading a final story. The heat of mead spread slow and golden through the body. Outside, snow pressed against the walls. Inside, eyelids grew heavy. Sleep came easily, not as escape, but as participation in the same steady rhythm that carried their whole world forward. By now the fire has dimmed to a slow, breathing glow. The air smells faintly of smoke and honey, of wool and the clean chill leaking in through the walls. You're not merely falling asleep. You're entering a rhythm older than memory. To the Vikings, rest wasn't wasted time. It was alignment. The body and world moving in concert. Each night was a small rehearsal of life itself. Labor, warmth, surrender, renewal. They didn't divide the world into waking and sleeping, work and leisure, sacred and ordinary. It was all one current. Sleep was simply the quieter half of motion, the moment when effort folded back into restoration. Dreams were the bridge. They weren't dismissed as nonsense or chemical static. They were messages, sometimes from gods, sometimes from ancestors, sometimes from the self. A good dream could guide a choice. A troubling one could be warning or prophecy. You didn't run from them. You learned their language. And maybe that's what set Viking rest apart. They trusted the dialogue between body and nature. If winter stretched long, they slept long. If summer burned bright, they rose early. If their minds ached from worry, they leaned on honey, herbs, heat, or a whispered verse. Nothing was mechanical. Everything was responsive. When you lie down again, you can feel that same logic hum in your own blood, the ancient pattern still there under centuries of noise. Breathe in. The air cools your face, warms your chest. Somewhere outside, the wind brushes through pine and turf. Inside, someone shifts closer in sleep. The Longhouse sighs once more, its heartbeat steady in the embers. The world narrows to breath, warmth, and the slow pulse of renewal. You realize that sleep, for them, wasn't escape, it was belonging. The last spark fades. The night closes around you, not empty, but full. And you understand, maybe for the first time, that real rest isn't about closing your eyes. It's about opening yourself to the rhythm that's been waiting since the world began. Not always in big pours, often just a mouthful or two before bed. Enough to sand down the edges, to quiet the thoughts still clattering in your skull. And because it ran lower in alcohol than modern spirits, it didn't flatten people. It loosened them. It let the mind drift and cracked the gates of sleep a little wider. In plenty of sagas, mead is tied to poetry, foresight, and altered states. There's the famed mead of poetry, stolen from giants and gifted to humankind by Odin himself, a wonder brew granting wisdom and vision. Myth? Or a poetic gloss on very real heady nights with spiced, fermented drinks under firelight. And story? Hard to say. Either way, it points to a truth. Drink was more than refreshment to the Norse. It was a bridge. Between people, between ideas, and yes, between waking and sleep. Now to the mushrooms, the part where things get, well, literal. Precise usage is hard to pin down, but many scholars argue that Norse folk, especially in Sami-influenced regions, knew and used Amanita muscaria, the red, white-speckled cap that looks like it stepped out of a fairy tale. You've seen it in art, on winter ornaments, in old picture books. Toxic in heavy doses, but carefully dried and treated, it can bring on visions, strange dreams, vivid hallucinations, and a trance-adjacent, powerful rest. This wasn't a bedtime snack passed around for fun. Such mushrooms tended to be reserved for ritual settings and handled by specialists, shamans, and spirit workers trained to navigate what followed. The point remained. Nature offered tools for change, and whether you were aiming for a vision or sinking into unusually deep rest, the boundary between spiritual journey and good sleep was hazy. More common were the plant allies. The Norse were plant literate in ways most modern folks couldn't fake. Elderberry, valerian root, mugwort, yarrow, juniper. Hardy things that thrive in cold places. They weren't only for wounds or stew. They belonged to the sleep kit. Valerian, in particular, turns up in burials, tucked with other herbs, likely as a calmer. Its root has sedative effects. You can still buy it in capsules today. Back then, you chewed it, simmered it, or tossed it on the fire so its scent could drape the Longhouse like an unseen blanket. Herbs might be tied into a little cloth and hung over the bed beam or stuffed inside a pillow. The smells were earthy, sometimes sharp comforting, not odd. Mugwort especially was thought to spark vivid dreams and ward off nightmares. You'd fall asleep with that clean, mint-bitter note in your nose, and maybe, just maybe, dream a shade deeper than last night. Here's a curious fringe note. Some archaeologists think grave goods, herbs, mead, even mushrooms weren't only provisions for the afterlife. They might also be offerings from sleep itself, tokens carried out of the dream realm and honored in return. As if to say, this helped me cross last night. I give it back. Poetic, yes, but it hints at how seriously the Norse treated what happened behind closed eyes. Of course, not every household could reach for rare botanicals or strong brews. Plenty made do with what grew nearby: simple teas, basic infusions, or nothing at all. The belief beneath it didn't change. Sleep was precious, and if the land offered help, you used it carefully, respectfully, usually under the eye of someone older and wiser. Scholars still debate scope. Some claim mushroom lore is overplayed, borrowed, distorted, or modernly romanticized. Others point to oral traces and grave patterns suggesting a culture deeply familiar with natural sleep aids, used not to flee life, but to tune into its spiritual and emotional rhythms. And now, you feel it yourself. Just a couple of swallows of mead. The fire is low again. The Longhouse is quiet, except for a lullaby murmured in the dark. You're not drunk. You're not drugged. You're ready. Limbs unhurried, eyes soft, thoughts untying one from another. The light in the hearth pulses like a heartbeat, and your body gives way, not as defeat, but as a sacred yielding. You turn to your side, valerian scent still faint on your skin, and the slide begins. Sleep arrives easily, guided by land, by people, by rituals carried across generations. You're not leaving the world, you're stepping into another layer of it. Next comes what waits past that layer, waking without alarms, schedules, or Monday dread. Because the Vikings owned no clocks, yet somehow rose exactly when they needed. You linger in the heat for a long while. No stopwatch, no schedule, just until your muscles stop protesting and your mind goes quiet. You sip water or a light herbal brew. You talk if you like, or simply listen to stones hiss and bodies shift in the steam. When enough is enough, when your joints feel like honey and your thoughts like still water, you step outside and let the cold strike. It bites the skin, clears the lungs, flips the brain awake, like plunging your face into snow, which, yes, some Vikings did. Sprinting from steam to drifts, or dipping in cold rivers when the season allowed, wasn't macho posturing. It jolted circulation, toned the skin, and flooded you with endorphins. A full reset before bed, your body gets the memo. Good work. Now rest. Fringe note. In Iceland, hot water for bathing and steaming builds right into many homes even now, a cultural echo of this practice. Bathing wasn't a rarity, it was routine. There were even customs and rules: who entered, when, how long, what conduct. Not a novelty, a norm. Cleanliness held status in the Norse world. The grimy Viking stereotype is mostly nonsense. Enemies wrote about how neat they kept themselves: frequent washing, trimmed hair, time spent grooming. Sleep was sacred. Arriving at it clean was part of the respect. But the bathhouse did more than wash it bridged states. This was the in-between where the body moved from toil to rest. You didn't collapse into bed gritty and frantic. You arrived limbered, heated, softened. If sleep was a rite, the sauna was its invocation. Scholars argue about how universal or frequent sauna use was. Regional resources varied across Finland, Sweden, Norway, Iceland. Some say daily in certain places, others specific days or ceremonial cleansings. Few deny heat bathing's presence. It shows up in law codes, sagas, poems. For women, it was social too, a place to share talk and knowledge. Births happened there at times, healing rites, protections. The dead were washed there too. Womb and tomb beginnings and endings wrapped in steam. You're walking back from the sauna now, skin still smoking in the cold. You feel light emptied, not just clean. Legs warm, spine loose, face open. You step into the longhouse and breathe deep. Smoke, herbs, wool. When you lie down, there's no tightness in the shoulders, no knotting in the back. Only a ready body sinking into fur and wool. This isn't mere rest, it's restoration. The sauna returned your softness. Sleep will finish the work. No wonder they slept well. No wonder dreams came easy. Even in a hard world, the Norse carved out an island of warmth and kindness. The evening itself taught the body to let go. Now step outside again, this time into the teeth of the world. Storms, beasts, and elements don't care about bedtime. The Vikings slept through them anyway, thanks to design as much as grit. The wind is baying, low and animal, nosing for a seam. Snow ticks on the roof. Trees groan like they remember old weather. Inside, steady, warm. You're under the firs listening to the rage and feeling nothing but calm. No grabbing for an emergency phone. Viking houses were built like timber fortresses, disguised as barns. These walls have outlived more winters than you have birthdays. Architecture is the unsung hero of Viking sleep. The Longhouse wasn't just a clever workshop with stalls. It was a storm-tight cocoon. Thick timbers carefully notched, roof lines that shed wind, thatch pitched steep to shuck rain, snow heaped as bonus insulation. The structure flexed. It wasn't a brittle box waiting to crack. Joints and beams allowed minute give under pressure. Snow load, crosswind, freeze thaw. Think of that pleasant old house creak during weather only. Here it's intentional. The house moves with the storm, not against it. So you don't lie awake waiting for collapse. Warmth holds, physical and emotional. The fire hums. The logs don't chatter. Someone turns over and tugs a blanket. The outside clamor becomes comfort. Proof you're safe. A lullaby if you let it. Consider the door. Usually one, low, heavy, barred at night. Ducking to enter helps trap heat and slows trouble. The Norse weren't anxious. They were ready. Wolves, thieves, bad spirits. The Longhouse was a sanctuary as much as a shelter. And it wasn't only walls that steadied sleep. It was people. You weren't alone hearing the wind. You had kin, friends, creatures that trusted you. The weight of shared bodies, breath, and soft snores was its own defense. The house was loud with life. That noise itself made you safe. Fringe note. Some longhouses were bermed with turf or set into hillsides, so the earth itself insulated and muffled. In a blizzard, sound fell away. cabin meets cave. The hearth helped. Two kept low but living. It lit the room enough that waking never meant blind fumbling. Hearthstone held heat for hours, warming floors. Scholars disagree on how sealed and smoke-managed these houses were. Some say leaky and harsh. Others argue that coastal and Icelandic builds achieved real comfort below freezing. Everyone agrees on this. Viking sleep spaces were resilient, not perfection survival with grace. Enter the animals: goats, cows, dogs, cats, hens. They weren't just tolerated, they were part of the system. Not only because they needed shelter, but because they helped make shelter. Livestock heat mattered. Animals had their end of the house, partitioned or slightly lower breath steaming, warmth rising. Humans slept on raised platforms across the way, a low wall or simply space between, and heat drifted through. Sounds drifted too. Soft snorts, a cloven hoof in straw, a chicken's muffled talk. Dogs and cats roamed freely. Cats nestled in furs, purred into laps, wedged between shoulders. Dogs were foot warmers, back heaters, early alarms woven into sleep, sometimes literally, judging by morning tangles. These weren't ornaments. They were workers, sheepdogs, mousers, hunters beloved and useful. Fun fringe note: Viking dogs often had people names: Snary, Scully, Garm, and some wore ceremonial collars or were buried with their humans. In the coldest places, letting a dog under the blankets wasn't indulgence. It was policy. Warmth, companionship, and a warning bark if anything prowled. Beyond heat, there's something older. Sleeping beside animals soothes the nervous system breath rhythms, body warmth, small night movements. Modern studies back it. Vikings didn't need them. A dog's easy snore beats a white noise app. For children, it was essential. A kid between parents, a purring cat against the ribs, a rooster's ridiculous dawn call meaning the night ended safely, the world still turning. Some scholars note that wealthier homes sometimes separated animals more or kept detached stalls, but dogs and cats stayed close. And always there was a spiritual layer. Animals were sacred in Norse myth, cats to Freya, dogs as guides and guardians. Sharing a bed wasn't merely practical, it signaled protection and favor. Even cows and goats carried symbolic heft milk, strength, constancy. Their midnight shift was part of the chorus: embers, breath, murmurs, wind. Not sterile, alive. It reminded people they belonged to nature, not over it. Maybe you'd returned from a raid or a brutal day in fields. By night you shared heat with the goat that would feed you tomorrow, and the dog that watched your children. That's not mess, that's kinship. You shift in the bedding, a straw tickle, a paw near your calf, a far bleat. You smile, heat everywhere, some human, some not. Under one roof, all of you drift. 4 legs, 2 legs, whiskers, hooves. Timber creaks slightly as the night deepens. Lift your eyes now. Not every night is easy. Some run hot, some go feral, and many Norse blamed or blessed the moon. Tonight the sky is silver. A full moon hangs just above the ridgeline, bold and steady, blazing the snow outside. Even through smoke holes and thatch cracks, it finds you, cool on the cheek, soft on the brow. You stir, not fully awake, not fully under. The moon does that. Lunar cycles weren't wallpaper. They wound through the Norse calendar and nerves. The moon told time, hinted at fate, and yes, messed with sleep. People toss more, dogs shift, livestock go strangely quiet. No one needs to say it. The moon is looking. The Norse didn't merely note the moon. They named and revered it. Mani, brother to Sul, chased nightly by the wolf Hati. If Hati caught him, darkness took the world. Phases full to new reminded them that even gods move in cycles, and so do humans. Old calendars were lunar. Months turned with the moon. Planting, raiding, feasts, eyes always on that disk. People felt tugged, like tides. Full moon meant odd dreams, frayed tempers, wakeful kids, restless animals. Warriors sometimes took it as a sign to act. Lying awake in a blade of moonlight, you aren't alone. The room is quiet, alert. The world is thinner. Dreams run deeper. You wait to see what the moon decides. Fringe note. Lunar symbols. Crescents, full circles. Spirals turn up on artifacts and amulets, carved into combs and horns. Not just decoration protection. The moon ruled not only sleep, but lunacy too. A man thrashing in dreams wasn't merely having a rough night. He might be moon-touched. A child crying long under a full moon was seen as open to forces, sensitive, not cursed. The boundary between spiritual and physical wasn't our modern line. Moonlit nights thinned veils between living and dead, gods and mortals, seen and unseen. Hence the rituals, offerings at thresholds, low songs, doors bolted a bit tighter. The moon was feared and cherished, especially by women who tracked their own cycles and timed births and rites by its phases. It framed life even when it made sleep slippery. Some households embraced it. If no one could sleep, they told longer stories and laughed louder. Extra wakefulness meant extra life. In that limbo, the best dreams often came. Modern research is catching up. Full moons can shorten deep sleep and shift REM. Theories vary, but the pattern holds. The Vikings knew it without graphs. Centuries of watching and feeling under that glow. Tonight, you're half awake in silver. Someone sighs. The dog stands, stretches, settles. You think of speaking of sharing that strange dream, but let it go. Moonlight maps your face. You accept it as visitation, not interruption. Sleep slides back gently. You may dream again. You may not. You shared a night with Mani. That makes it holy enough. Now for something tender. Love and closeness. The embers are small and red. Breathing fills the room, wood creaks. Blankets rustle. Someone sighs. But under one fur pile, two bodies are still awake, pressed together. Voices no louder than breath. In the Viking world, sleep and intimacy weren't split apart. They shared space, bed, and beat. Warmth came from more than the fire. We like to cast Norse life as all hard edges, ice seas, iron faces. That's half a picture. These people were also gentle when gentleness was called for. The body wasn't only a tool for work or war. It was something to keep and to cherish. When the day was done and the night closed like a cloak, touch wasn't a luxury. It was necessary. There was no true privacy curtain, no separate suite, but closeness wasn't exactly scandalous. In a longhouse where families slept within arm's reach, couples learned invisible ways to be near. A shift of blankets, a palm over hip or shoulder, a whisper in the dark. The culture made room for that pleasure, yes, but also connection and comfort. Marriage often served practical ends. Property, alliances, survival. That doesn't mean it lacked tenderness. Plenty of couples grew devoted. Some sagas even hold up deep, steady love husbands and wives, keeping faith through battles, famine, long winters together. And in the small, hushed hours, they folded into each other, not just for warmth, but for that steadying truth. You are not alone, and it wasn't only within marriage. Norse life made space for many bonds lovers, hand-fasted pairs, widows and widowers who found comfort again. It wasn't all rigid rules and moral scolding. Vikings were practical. If it kept people warm, connected, and sane through a 7-month winter, it was acceptable. Here's a fringe detail to raise an eyebrow. Bed sharing sometimes appeared in contracts, explicitly. Surviving marriage texts include lines about sharing the bed and blanket, making physical nearness part of the agreement. It wasn't scandal, it was frankness. This was a culture that acknowledged bodies and needs, and didn't dance around them. You're lying there now, half waking, half drifting, someone's breath on your nape, a leg lightly resting over yours. The blanket traps the pooled heat, but the warmer thing is the weight of another person, the reassurance of touch. No grand declarations, no recited epics, just presence, and that's sufficient. Intimacy softened the day's roughness. After the ache of fieldwork or the tight coil before a voyage, these quiet moments were pressure valves, a simple, "we made it through." Nothing theatrical. No staged seduction, no candlelit set piece, just a slow turn in the dark. Two people reaching by instinct that needs no explanation. If a child stirred nearby, or an elder sighed and shifted, so be it. You paused or didn't. Modesty worked differently here, based less on hiding and more on mutual respect. People knew how to give space even in the same few square yards. Walls weren't required to make a private moment. Understanding was. Scholars still spar over how openly affectionate the Norse were. Some cite the severe landscape, the flinty temperaments, the pragmatic tone of marriage documents. Others point to tenderness preserved in verse love poems carved into stone, or to quiet saga scenes of waiting by a hearth, or of a spouse who never remarried after a loss. Truth sits somewhere between. Vikings weren't sugary with sentiment. They weren't ice either. They were human taking on love, want, and solace with the same rough-hewn grace they brought to everything else. For those without a partner, the Longhouse still offered kinship. You might lie beside a sibling, a friend, an elder, or curl an arm around a child, or let a loyal animal curl into you. Closeness wasn't always erotic. It didn't need to be. The intimacy of Viking sleep was broader than one relationship type. It was presence. You knew who was near. You matched their breathing. You rested better because you weren't alone. The Norse even honored deities of love and connection. Freya, patron of beauty and fertility, was venerated for sensual power and spiritual force alike. People asked her not only for matches, but for grounded, lived love, the kind that blooms in firelight and endures cold weather. You pull the furs higher. A hand finds yours beneath the covers. No words, none required. The world beyond may be wide and merciless, but here, in this softened, shared space, you are tethered, rooted, warm body and spirit. You will sleep more deeply for it, not only because the bedding is warm, or the embers still glow, but because the presence at your side quiets the mind. You have someone. They have you. That's a sleep worth entering, and a dream worth staying in. Next, we turn the blanket toward the shadows, because not every night was calm. Some sleep broke under fear of spirits, of enemies, of thoughts that wouldn't still. Tonight is different. The air feels heavier, as if the Longhouse is holding its breath. The hearth mutters, but doesn't soothe as it usually does. Your furs are warm. Your body is spent. Sleep won't catch. You shift and listen. One timber above you creaks. A goat huffs. Still, you can't settle. Something's misaligned. And you're not the only one tuned to it. For all the peace Viking nights could offer, some were uneasy, pricked by danger, haunted by presences, crowded with worries. Even the fiercest fighters had hours when rest hovered just out of reach. That wasn't weakness. It was life in a place where threat wasn't metaphor. It was tangible and near. You could bar the door and bank the fire and still feel a chill that wasn't weather. Call it instinct. Call it the old fear. Either way, some nights you lay awake and wondered if someone or something would find a way in. Start with the enemies you can name. Feuds ran deep. Grudges could span generations. A wronged cousin, a rival farmer, a former ally turned sour, and he might creep up under darkness, blade and memory in hand. Violence didn't always roar. It could arrive on quiet feet through a poorly set latch. So you slept lightly, ears clipped to small sounds. You kept an axe within reach. You rotated watch so someone was always awake. Then there were the others. Vikings didn't believe the world stopped at the edge of the fire's glow. Outside that circle lived gods, yes, but also older, darker things. The Draugr, for one restless dead who rose again. Not mindless rot, but warped echoes of the once living. People with business unfinished or bad deaths. Fireside tales told of a man buried with silver who knocked a week later, eyes black, mouth open. No one wanted to meet him in a dream. Households set up defenses, charms above bed frames, iron at thresholds, runes cut into beams, small packets of herbs mugwort, juniper under pillows. If a family thought they'd offended an ancestor or spirit, they left a small offering at the boundary. A piece of bread, a splash of mead, a soft apology. Not superstition negotiation. Fringe note, some longhouses were oriented carefully, avoiding a direct line to certain burial mounds or sacred groves. Builders angled doorways and entry paths away from old spirit roads. You built to hold heat, to stay out of sight from what you didn't want visiting. But not all fear was otherworldly. Sometimes it was the fretwork of your own head. Memory, regret, logistics. Did you misstep at the feast? Did you insult a neighbor? Is your boy ready for his first voyage? Will the weather spare the harvest? These weren't idle loops, they mattered. They could snare you in half-sleep, mind wandering as the body lay. That's when you turn toward the living. A whisper in the dark. Still awake? Shared insomnia was normal, expected even. In that night-quiet honesty, bonds deepened. You weren't fixing. You were being heard. Rituals took their turn. Someone sat by the fire, stirring coals and thinking of the dead. Another chewed a calming root or murmured protective lines. A third stepped outside, letting cold slap the face. The sky steadied them. Stars reminded them of scale. Then they padded back, weaving past sleepers, and lay down, if not to sleep, then to rest. Even the gods had ragged nights. Odin, restless wanderer, gave up an eye for wisdom, and often walked the world sleepless, burdened by visions of war and of Ragnarok. If All-Father tossed in his own hall, what chance did a sailor have? Oddly, that comforted people. The gods struggled too. Modern scholars argue over how widespread those fears were. Did folks truly believe in ghosts? Were the tales meant mainly to keep children close to home? Hard to pin down. But burial customs, house orientations, and saga motifs suggest that night carried meanings beyond sleeping. It watched, and you were watched. You roll again, eyes shut, making another try. The Longhouse sings its familiar chorus breaths, embers, a whisper, the soft click of an animal turning in straw. You remind yourself the door is barred, your kin close, the charm above your bed in place. Your breathing lengthens, thoughts dim one by one. Sleep won't always come fast, but it comes. And when it does, it lifts you beyond feuds and phantoms, into a reach where none of it can touch you. Next, we board the dragon-proud hulls and learn what it meant to sleep on the water. Because yes, Vikings slept on ships, rocking through squalls and skirting shoals. Somehow made that rest count too. The sea cradles you with calloused hands. One breath you rise on a long swell, the next you drop into a trough, stomach lagging behind. Not quiet, not gentle but familiar. You're swaddled in wool, spine to the curved plank of a longship, head tipped to the stars. You're trying to sleep, oppressed among men who smell of salt, smoke, and fish. And somehow you might manage it. Shipboard sleep wasn't luxury. It was cramped and bare. No cabin, no bunk, no feather pillow. Long ships weren't built for comfort. They were taut wood and nerve sleek, narrow, with no below decks to crawl into. You slept under sky, or not at all. But you did, because sleep was a tool, even when rain spat and the hull groaned. As with everything Norse, the key was adaptation. You learned the fold that kept spray off your neck. You found the part of the deck with the least motion. You shared heat with the man beside you, like him or not. You slept by turns. Someone always watched wind, stars, and horizon in case they bit back. For scale, many longships ran up to 70 feet, crews of 30 to 60 each, with an oar, a kit, and heavy fatigue. When oars idled on glassy fjords, or in a steady windman seized moments, collapsing between ribs and thwarts like sacks of grain. Beds, none. Maybe a straw sack if fortune smiled, or a dry stretch of sailcloth. You curled where the planks allowed on your side, or flat with hands folded over your chest, like a man rehearsing his burial. Stars overhead reminded you of your ship's smallness. Oddly, that could soothe. Fringe aside, some people slept in ships forever. A chieftain's vessel could become his tomb, buried on land with weapons, goods, and sometimes animals or slaves. The ship carried you through this life, and would, ideally, carry you onward with decent shut-eye at last. But while alive and mid-voyage, the soundscape had its own logic. Slap of water, creak of rope, a sudden sail snap, a cough, a mutter. A watchman hums, eyes on dark water. He's weary too, but upright. His alertness buys you your doze. The rocking lullaby to some, nausea to others becomes, with time, a rhythm you can lean into. You learn to breathe with the motion. It's not perfect rest, but it's enough. The half-sleep warrior's master. One eye cracked, muscles ready, mind loosened just enough to recharge. Debate continues over how well Norse crews slept at sea. Some say brutal crossings left little rest. Others answer that these were fjord-raised sailors who found footing on boats before they could heft a sword, and to them decks felt like home. No hammocks, true, but ingenuity helped. Wool cloaks doubled as weather shields, shields themselves wind-blocked. Oars became props, anchor in a quiet cove, and you might catch real sleep. The only nuisance a neighbor's snore or a curious seal. Raids and landings shredded sleep into fragments. 10 stolen minutes before rowing again, an hour after first watch, and, on land at last, a collapse by the fire that felt thrice earned. You turn on your makeshift mattress. A knot in the board presses your rib, but you ignore it. The stars remain. The watchman remains. And so does the faith that this hull exposed as it feels has carried you through storms, hunger, and boredom alike. If you can sleep here, you can sleep anywhere. Soon you do not pretty, not deep, but real. The kind that keeps you going, keeps you sane, reminds you that even explorers need to close their eyes and drift. Next comes the one who must stay awake. Because every night someone took the watch on sea, in camp, at the tree line. And surprisingly, it didn't ruin their sleep. It improved it. You're awake. It's your turn. The fire is down to gold bones. Most of the house is in thick, sleep-slow breaths. Children sprawled over arms, bodies cocooned in fur. Even the goats are still. Not you. Night watch is older than memory. Your eyes make peace with the dark. Your ears sift creaks, sighs, faint frost crunch beyond the wall. They dream. You hold the border. Watch wasn't punishment. It was honor. In Norse life, a line always needed guarding, and that line thinned most in the small hours, when fire waned and dreams ran odd. At sea, In a camp or in the Longhouse, the job was the same. Stay awake, stay aware, let others sleep with trust. In the hall, you sat by the hearth, feeding it now and then, listening for wolves or footsteps or a bad turn in the wind. You watched the door. You kept an eye for embers trying to climb into dry thatch. You scanned faces, brother, mother, wife, dog, and remembered that they believed you would hold. No nodding, no dozing. Just you and the dark, nodding to each other. At sea, it was harsher no fire, just the rush of water and whisper of wind. You tracked shifting stars, the swell hint of land, sails where none should be. Sometimes you stood alone, sometimes with another. Either way, it mattered. And here's the surprise. This wasn't seen as a sleep debt. They didn't think a watch destroyed you. They structured rest around it, segmented sleep in pieces rather than one slab. You might sleep hard from dusk to midnight, rise for a shift, then go back down till dawn, or take 4 hours here, 2 there. Norse nights weren't built around an 8-hour monolith. They were built around balance. Fringe note: modern research into pre-industrial sleep finds segmented sleep common and often preferred. People liked waking between cycles for prayer, small tasks, talk, or thought. First sleep and second sleep would have made easy sense in a Norse village. Your watch likely sat right between them. You shift on the bench, stretch your legs. A log settles with a soft crack. You toss on a branch, warmth blooms. Sleepers nearest the hearth murmur and nestle closer. You smile. For now, this is your small kingdom. Watch wasn't always solitary. Two might share it, hushed talk, trading stories, planning, teasing, remembering. These were honest hours, separate from the day. You voiced fears you'd swallow in sunlight, or you kept it spiritual, believing the veil thinned in darkness, that gods wandered, that the dead could speak through cold air. You guarded the door from people and from anything else passing by. To keep awake, you chewed bitter herbs, rubbed life back into your legs, paced a quiet ring just beyond the firelight, and let chill sharpen your mind. When your time ended, and another rose bleary, reaching for a cloak, you nodded, lay down, and sleep fell on you like a tide. Not collapse welcome. You earned it with vigilance, not just muscle. Some suggest this pattern sleep in shifts, wakefulness woven into night-fed Norse resilience. While others feared darkness, the North lived in it. A fractured night didn't mean failure. It meant function. Missing a full cycle didn't make you lesser. It made you part of a rhythm larger than one person. You glance around. The sleepers rest on. The child has wriggled half out of covers. You tuck them back. The dog by the door lifts a head, settles again, comforted by you. The wind picks up. You file the change away for morning. Your turn is nearly done. Soon someone else will rise. You'll close your eyes, muscles unclench, and sleep will come heavy and quick, because you held the night long enough for others to dream. Now morning glides in like a curtain, opening a finger's width. No cinematic blaze, just a shift. The embers dull to dusty red. Beyond the wall, a rooster scrapes out a call. You stretch under fur limbs heavy, warmth pooled, and already miss the dream fading behind you. Day is here. Before you stand, ask it plainly. What did they understand about sleep that we've misplaced? By modern metrics, their world should have ruined rest cold air, hard boards, noisy rooms, enemies near, mushrooms of dubious repute, open flame hazards, no blackout anything. Yet they slept deeply, communally, well. Start with rhythm. They didn't arm wrestle nature's clock. They moved with it. Long days, long nights, summer, winter, they adapted. They didn't cram rest into a rigid, purified 8 hours. They let it come in waves. 2 night blocks, A nap by the coals, a drowse on a rolling deck. No shame for mid-watch yawns or afternoon weariness. Energy was managed, not bullied. Then the setting. Your bedroom sealed, climate fixed, lit by tiny LEDs versus their hall. Clean, cold air that nudges core temperature downward. Science now says that deepens sleep. And darkness that was truly dark. No neighbor's porch glow. Their nights were built for restoration. They weren't fighting lumens. The space shared natural fit biology better than convenience. Materials mattered too. Fur, wool, feather, straw survival choices that happen to excel at temperature regulation. Natural fibers breathe, trap heat without smothering, carry weight that calms the body, what we now market as grounding. Your weighted blanket? Try layered fox pelt with a hint of goat. Community may be the biggest lever. They didn't sleep alone in plan or practice. Children, elders, animals, warriors, one warm breathing organism. Safety in numbers made literal. That soft chorus breaths, snores, murmurs wasn't disruption. It was assurance. The nervous system could finally uncoil because it knew it was held. Touch, constant, not always romantic, sometimes simply human. A dog across your feet, a sibling at your back, a partner's palm under yours. Today's data says touch lowers cortisol and deepens REM. The Vikings didn't need the paper. They had the proof. Attitude mattered. Sleep wasn't a chore or a contest. It was honored. Dreams weren't trash to forget by breakfast. They were messages, omens, counsel. If you woke with a strange vision, you told someone. Meaning was made. Even fear had a place. Haunting nights weren't failures. They were weather. If you slept poorly, it wasn't personal flaw. It was the world stirring. Maybe spirits were close. Maybe you needed to stand watch. Maybe you had to sit with a hard feeling. The Norse built rituals around the fact that not all sleep is smooth. Were there downsides? Absolutely. Illness, smoke, cold snaps, sore backs, thin bedding. But sleep wasn't an individual puzzle. Solved by apps, it was shared terrain navigated as a household, a village, a people. The funny part, much of it is back again. Cold rooms, heavy blankets, segmented sleep, dream logs, soundscapes, saunas, co-sleeping. New ideas. The North mastered 1,000 winters ago. No lab, shaky grasp of REM, perfect instincts. What can you borrow? Dim early. Let your body coast into night. Skip the screen. Use flame or a warm amber light. Cool the room. Keep the covers warm. Choose natural fibers. Sleep near someone or something if you can. Scritch your dog. Let your cat claim your ribs. Don't fight a 3 a.m. wake. Use it. Reflect. Pray. Check the door. Be the watch. Then lie back down. Treat sleep as sacred, not fragile. Not performative, messy. Rhythmic. Shared. Vital. Let the dark be dark. Let the mind tell stories. Let your dead, if they insist, whisper something odd. Most of all, Vikings didn't sleep like warriors to impress anyone. They slept that way because survival demanded it. The world was too raw to forfeit rest. They knew rest is readiness. They didn't chase perfect nights. They assembled good ones. One ember, one pelt, one steady breath at a time. So tonight, in your own room, no creaking hall, no hearth, no goat climbing your lap, just a fan's low hum, a lamp you should have killed 10 minutes ago, and the city's soft rustle beyond the wall. Let their rhythm linger. You probably aren't betting on straw, but you can close the laptop earlier. Dim the lights, dodge the doom scroll. Find a blanket with the right weight. Let your body remember deep rest. The Vikings didn't need sleep aids. They were the aid. Kin warmth, hiss of steam, cool air on skin, permission to wake and keep watch. They made sleep human again, unperformed, uncompetitive, natural. And if you do wake, Heart thumping for no clear reason. Brain replaying a ghost from 6 years back. Remember the night watch. It's all right to be the one awake, to listen, to breathe, to tend the ember. In the end, the best sleep is not about silence, softness, or thread count. It's safety, warmth, trust, a body at ease, a mind allowed to wander, and a room ship, hall, or bedroom built to hold you while you dream. Take a breath. Let go. You are not alone in the dark.